Alright, what is up guys? So as you guys can see, I'm back in the classroom for this very important video. So yes, I uploaded a two-part monologue, so titled Incel Copium, part 1 and part 2. The total length of that monologue is 2 hours and 39 minutes. So thank you guys so much for if you guys have actually watched the entire monologue. I did say I will come back to the classroom in November to finish part 3. So don't worry, this part is not going to be as long as the first two. So I think this is a very interesting topic. A lot of you guys might be curious. You might be thinking that how did China achieve its economic miracle? So yeah, I'm turning into a professor mode for this video. This is part 3, the finale of the Incel Copium monologue. Why do Asians and whites live longer than blacks and Hispanics? This is actually very interesting. It comes down to actually two things. I mentioned this before in a video last year. It triggered so many people, especially black men. I talked about truancy. Yeah, so truancy, that's what happens when you skip school and eventually drop out of school. Yes, dropping out of school will lead to generational poverty, and dropping out of school will also guarantee that you will live a shorter life. Okay, there's no doubt about it. So yeah, this is what I'm going to cover for this video. I'm going to cover, so the sins of the boomers, both in China and also in Western countries. The pension system, how did it actually start, especially in China. And I'm going to talk about physical labor. This is what happens when you drop out of school, and education level. So this is the life expectancy in US right now in 2025. Very interesting, right? So if you're a person with master's degree or above, your average life expectancy is 85. And also even for this varies. You can divide this into men. So for men with master's degrees or above, it's 83. For women in America, 87. Yeah, that's not bad, eh? 87 years old. So if you're someone who has a university degree, by the way, I don't mean university does not include college. So I'm talking about a 4-year degree. So your life expectancy will be 83 years old. And if you're someone who is a high school graduate, okay, your life expectancy is 75. And if you're someone who dropped out of school, right, before graduating high school, if you dropped out of school before turning into adult, your life expectancy is only 71 years old. So 71 years old, right? Dropping out before high school. Master's degree, 85. 14-year difference. Why? How is that happening? Yeah, let me break this down to you guys. So right there, right, that is undisputable evidence. So yeah, and if you look at who is the most likely to drop out of school in America, I'm sorry to say, right, that the two most likely demographics are blacks and Hispanic Americans, and who is the most likely to stay in school for the longest, right? Whites and Asians. That's why they get to live longer. So why is this happening, right? So what happens if you don't have a degree? If you don't have a piece of paper or certification, what happens when you drop out of school? Well, inevitably, unless you're one of those extreme cases where you turn into Speed or something, or Mr. Beast, you will go into a blue-collared profession. You'll work at a factory. You'll be a bricklayer working construction. Well, and if you do have a piece of paper, if you have a 4-year degree, most likely going to go into a white-collar job. Yes, I understand the law has changed, but once again, talking about on average. So generally speaking, that's what's going to happen to most people. Let's talk about China's economic miracle. This is actually all related. So if you want to talk about the peak of China's economic miracle, I would say that's from 2001 to 2008, leading up to the Beijing Olympic Games in the summer of 2008. But I think this era can be expanded from November 1978 to end of 2019, before COVID happened. So China's economy is certainly in a decline, largely due to the COVID pandemic. So this is a 41-year span, China's economic miracle. This man, Comrade Deng Xiaoping, once in a generation genius. By the way, Comrade Deng Xiaoping is 5'2", 157 centimeters. No more, no less. That's why I said, right, human beings, it doesn't matter which part of the world you come from. It doesn't matter what your religion is, doesn't matter what your ethnic background is, right? Nobody in this world can have both. Either you conquer the physical world or you conquer the intellectual world. Well, for someone like Comrade Deng Xiaoping, he was certainly able to conquer the intellectual world to the maximum potential. He was actually sent to exile twice during the course of the Cultural Revolution. And during this time period, leading up to November 1978, China was completely shattered, one of the poorest countries in the world. So September 1976, Chairman Mao Zedong passes away. It was a week of a national mourning period. And then Comrade Deng Xiaoping was given another chance. He was brought back from exile. At the time, China's leader was Hua Guofeng, but he's not really that important of a leader. So I'm here to talk about Comrade Deng Xiaoping. So after being brought back from exile, right, in the 2 years following after Chairman Mao's death, he would basically maneuver his way to the top of the China's Politburo. So that's what's called China's leadership positions. So you have a handful of people that's in the Politburo, and the people at the top, the 5 people at the top, is called the Politburo Standing Committee. So in November 1978, Deng actually becomes the 3rd most powerful man in China. But, that's just on paper. Everybody knows that who was the real person in charge. So, yeah, by November of 1978, Comrade Deng Xiaoping was really the one in charge of China. You have to remember this time period, 1978, China's literacy rate was only 20%. Yes, only 1 out of every 5 Chinese people could read or write. Yeah, this is because largely due to the Cultural Revolution. So universities has been closed for over a decade. And the average wage of a Chinese peasant in 1978, 25 Chinese yuan per month, something like $3.40 USD. China was one of the poorest countries in the world in terms of GDP per capita, but so much has changed since then, all thanks to Comrade Deng Xiaoping and his economic opening up. So then Comrade Deng Xiaoping decides to do something. He decides to visit Japan. So I did mention before, right, after Chairman Mao declares victory in the Chinese Civil War, and the People's Republic of China was founded on October 1st of 1949. He boards a train. He visits the Kremlin to talk deals and negotiations with Joseph Stalin for the next 3 months, which I think was a huge mistake. I can come back to that topic later, but Comrade Deng realized that the Soviet Union, communism, they have lost their mind. So this is the moment. Basically, November 1978, Comrade Deng decided that China was no longer going to be communist. China was going to become a capitalist society. So, yeah, he takes a trip to Japan. Okay, there's not too many details. There's no official transcripts. Something mysterious happened. Something magical happened. You have to remember, right? So Japan in 1970. So you guys have to remember, right? September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese surrenders, ending World War II. Then Japan was basically colonized. They became the U.S.'s bitch. But, during the 1970s, the Japanese, before the Chinese, they were going through their own economic miracle. And many people thought that, Japan at a certain time period was going to overtake the United States. That eventually did not happen. But so Japan during this time period in 1978 was the 2nd most powerful economy in the world. So Comrade Deng thought, okay, I have to go check out Japan. I need to go to Tokyo. I need to talk to these Japanese government officials. I need to find out what is happening. Even though, yes, Japan's still China's public enemy number 1. But you guys all know that old saying, right? So you keep your friends close and you keep your enemies closer. And so there's no official transcripts from Comrade Deng's visit. Basically, something happened like this. Comrade Deng Xiaoping, he truly understood banking like the way he has never ever understood it before. Think about it like this, how banking actually works, right? So this is creating money out of thin air. Imagine, so yeah, you have $10,000 right now. So this is the age, back in 1978, there are very, very few banks in China. There's only one centralized bank in China. So the vast majority of the people that had a little bit of money, they kept it in their safe instead of their living room or their bedroom, right? It was locked safely inside of their safe. Then Comrade Deng realized something. This is how Japan achieved their economic miracle. Basically, what happens is if you're a middle-class Chinese peasant with a little bit of money, if you have $10,000 locked up in your safe, what happens when you take that $10,000 and you deposit it to the bank? Well, you are giving a loan to the bank. Now, out of the sudden, right, before the bank had no money, now the bank also has $10,000. So yes, think about it like this, right? So you have $10,000, you deposit it to the bank then gives you a receipt, right? The bank gives you a IOU. Now you're holding that receipt, you're holding that piece of paper that says you have $10,000. So now this piece of paper, the receipt is in your hands. You still have $10,000. It's just before that $10,000 was locked up in your safe back in your home, in your basement, your living room. And so instead of it being locked up in your safe, now you're depositing it to the bank. So anytime you take money, you're depositing it to your local bank, into your checkings or savings account. You're giving a loan to the bank. So now what happens is that, you got 10,000, the bank has 10,000 in their vault. Now, instead of 10,000, there's $20,000. I want you guys to really, really think about this concept. This is how banking works. This is how you create money out of thin air. This is how the bankers were able to get extremely wealthy. This is how they created generational wealth. This system, sure, is controversial, but it absolutely can work because that is exactly what Comrade Deng Xiaoping did. Then after Comrade Deng's visit to Japan, after he understood banking, he started a movement called 改革开放. So it basically translates to China's opening up, right? So China is not going to be a communist country anymore. China is going to become a Western capitalist country. And after Comrade Deng's visit to Japan, he decided to open up bank branches all over China. So what happened after China opened up bank branches in every single city, in every single subdivision, in all countrysides, right? So China was able to create billions of dollars of wealth, right? From absolutely nothing, from thin air, just like this, right? Before you had 10,000, the bank had nothing. Now you deposit your 10,000 to the bank has 10,000 and you have an IOU for 10,000. Now there's 20,000. So this is, creating money out of thin air. And a lot of this money went to developing China's infrastructure, which accounted for roughly 30% of China's GDP growth. And you have to think about, China developing these futuristic skylines. If you guys have been to Shanghai, if you've been to Beijing or Shenzhen or Guangzhou or Chongqing or Chengdu, you see these, absolutely insane skylines, right? Think about, the job opportunities that came along with developing these infrastructures, right? So, there were millions of jobs that were being created throughout the country. Jobs for construction workers, jobs for engineers, jobs for millwrights, for technicians, for plumbers, for electricians, for HVAC technicians, just you name it. So, and it's also very, very important to remember, the vast majority of the jobs that, accounted for 30% of China's GDP growth, they were given to young, skilled men, okay? You guys might think it's controversial, you guys might think it's misogynistic, but like I said before, no woman out there in any part of the world is going to marry a broke-ass guy with absolutely nothing. Men simply have to be better than the woman. And if you guys truly want to make the world a better place, if you want young people to get married, to have more children, if you guys want more family formations, and you have to give the vast majority of the good-paying jobs to young men. And also as a part of China's opening up, the transition to capitalism. So millions of adult students, many of my family members included my dad, my stepmom, my mom, my uncles, aunties. They were all offered to go back to school for free. Remember, during the Cultural Revolution, all of the universities closed down in China. Nobody had skills, nobody had education. And people like my mom who went back to school, she only went back to school for 2 years. Upon graduation, they were guaranteed job placements. And these job placements, they also came with free healthcare and free housing. So you have to remember, right? During this time period, China was desperate for these skilled workers with education because, only 20% of the population was actually literate. Comrade Deng Xiaoping also introduced this concept, the 996. You might think it's controversial, you might think it's draconian, but that is the only way to escape extreme poverty. I'm sorry to say, but facts don't care about your feelings. So the regular work hours in China, starting in 1978, it became between 10 to 12 hours a day. The average Chinese worker, 2 days off per month. Typically the first day of the month and the 15th day of the month. The reason why these 2 days are chosen is because of Buddhism. You have to remember, so Comrade Deng Xiaoping, he's a religious man. He's not a secular man. It's very, very important. You need to believe in God. And on top of the 2 days off per month, there were also extra public holidays. So most of the Chinese workers, they got on average, I would say 3 days off per month. No more, no less. That's what they call the 996, right? Basically 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Yeah, I mean, so what do you think happens? Let's say if someone's working 996, let's say 72 hours a week, right? Versus someone who is working 40 hours a week. Well, yeah, no shit. The person that's working 72 hours a week is going to have twice as much money, if not more. I'm just being brutally honest with you guys. And if you guys want to become a top G, if you guys want to achieve generational wealth, you want to be this and that, you want to score women like Scarlett Johansson or Madison Beer or Tate McRae, do you guys really think you can achieve that status by only working 40 hours a week? The answer is absolutely not. So you might think, okay, the 996 is controversial, but I'm just telling you, it's the only way to escape extreme poverty. And also, Comrade Deng, he introduced the concept of retirement. Yes, very, very important. That's why I talk about the sins of the boomers. So yeah, before 1978, there was no pension, zero. You worked until you die. Yes. And this is the retirement age he introduced because he realized, the 996 working hours, it will wear your body down. And so this is from 1978 until 2024. So in 2024, the retirement age was raised by 5 years due to shrinking population, right, and the shrinking workforce. So yeah, for 46 years, this is the retirement age in China. So for a woman that's in blue-collar jobs, the retirement age is 50. For women in white-collar jobs, the retirement age was 53. For men in blue-collar jobs, the retirement age was 55. And for men in white-collar jobs, the retirement age was 58. So, and by the way, so this is increased. So for men in white-collar jobs in 2025 now, it will be 63. So yeah, why do these men and women working in blue-collar jobs, why do they work 3 years less? Well, physical labor will break down your body. And yeah, that is exactly why women live longer than men. That is exactly why whites and Asians on average will live significantly longer versus blacks and Hispanics. If you drop out of school, if you have no skills, no education, no degree, and you end up doing construction, you end up becoming a bricklayer, yeah, you're not going to live very long. Yeah, because what happens is, even for the Chinese people, right, especially, once again, right, women, blue-collar jobs until 2024 could retire at 50, right? This is a privilege created, right, by a Chinese man for these Chinese women, for them to retire early. Well, it's because, if you're doing a physical labor, right, if you're working the 996 throughout your adult life, by the time you get to your 50s, every single Chinese person, right, working 996 in the blue-collar industry, you'll have this. In China, they call it 腰间盘突出. The rough translation in English is called the lumbar disc herniation. Yeah, I'm just giving you guys a warning, right? If you're a young guy, you think it's not a big deal, right? But I'm just telling you, if you go into a blue-collar industry, if you go into the trade, if you're working as a plumber or electrician or construction or bricklayer, almost every single one of you will get this at some point. And there's no cure. So you can only manage. This is inevitable. There's no cure to this lumbar disc herniation. The vast majority of people, you can only manage. A lot of Chinese people, they get massages, they get acupuncture, they take medicine, but there's nothing can cure this. So that's why, people in white-collar jobs, people with university degrees will live significantly longer. So yeah, and that is why so many poor men in the US, they're on painkillers, right? So I talk about this during my documentary for China's A Century of Humiliation. And yeah, this is why men die first. This is why women live longer, because the vast majority of some of the most physically demanding jobs, yeah, they're all done by men. I'm sorry to say, right? Look at all these feminists. They say they want equality. They don't want equality. These so-called fake feminists, these radical feminists, right? When they say they want equality, and they mean, they want only this. The executive suite jobs with air conditioning, and they want to sit in these chairs where they can spin around in circles all day. They don't want to work at any of the jobs that requires hard physical labor, and that is why women get to live significantly longer. And yeah, also the pension thing. So yeah, before Comrade Deng Xiaoping, China has never had a pension system. Very important. You work until you die. I don't think the boomers realize how lucky they are. And this is the same in the West when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he introduced the 65 years retirement age in America. Well, at the time, life expectancy was 63. You work until you die. That is why filial piety was taught throughout Chinese history because, well, you have to have children. So when you get old, when you can no longer work anymore, when you're weak and fragile, your children will take care of you. So what happens when you embrace this think movement where you have no kids? Well, back in the day, if a couple choose to not have kids, you're probably going to die in your 50s. As a matter of fact, what do you guys think the Romans or the Greeks, what do you guys think they did to old people back in the medieval times? So don't think that for a single second that the world is full of sunshines and rainbows, right? So the pension system, it was never a thing. You think these old white grandpas back in ancient Rome, you think after they turned 60, they say that, oh my God, finally I can get to enjoy my life in retirement. I can finally live in peace. I can go fishing every single day. I can just chill with my monthly pension, and I can just sit on my ass and have free food every single day. I don't have to do anything. No. Way back in the day, yeah, you can look this up. The Romans absolutely did this. Yeah, when people got old, when you can no longer produce anymore, when you can no longer work on the field, and what do you think? The government is going to give you a check every single month, and you expect somebody to feed you every single day? No, you become a burden because you can no longer produce food, yet you need to still eat 2 to 3 meals a day. Well, in the ancient times, for the Romans and the Greeks, they lined up these old people, and they pushed them off the cliffs, one by one. Yes, first they ask for volunteers, but if they don't get enough volunteers, well, then they look at these grandpas and grandmas. They're like, oh, well, these people, they're not working anymore. They're not contributing to the economy. They're not contributing to society, but we still have to feed them 3 times a day. But right now there's a famine going on in Florence right now. So, I mean, what are we going to do? So, yeah, we're going to line up these old people and push them off of cliffs. So, yeah. Pension until very, very recently, right? It was never a thing. Not in Western countries, certainly not in Asia, right? China never had a pension system up until 1978. People used to work until they die. And yeah, this is why I talk about, why think culture is so toxic, right? So yeah, this is all the selfishness of these boomers and the dinks, right? So, and because of, these dinks and people refusing to have children by 2035, because where do you think the pension money comes from? It comes from young people working 996 so they can contribute to the pensions of the boomers. So yeah, it's projected by 2035, China's pension money will completely run out due to a lack of young workers entering the workforce, due to collapsing birth rate, due to the Dinks movement. Let's recap this, right? Comrade Deng, November 1978 to 2019. So this is Comrade Deng. Banking can absolutely work if you do it the right way. Once again, like everything else in this world, it's always a double-edged sword, right? Interest rates, credit cards, line of credit, student loans can be a very, very dangerous system if you get on the wrong side of it. But if done correctly, it can lead to the greatest economic miracle the world has ever seen. So yeah, Comrade Deng's economic opening up, switching to capitalism, opening up bank branches all over China, introducing the 996 early retirement. And so the early retirement allows that. So only the workers in their physical prime are being used in the workforce to maximize their output, to maximize their productions. This led to a 15% increase in China's GDP, or I think GDP is not really accurate. So I would say the PPP is more important, the purchasing power parity. If you look at the current purchasing power parity, China is #1 in the world, way ahead of the United States. Well, this is because, you say the U.S. has a larger economy, but you have to remember a bag of milk and a dozen of eggs in China is going to cost anywhere between 5 to 10 times cheaper compared to the United States, right? $1 will take you so much further when you're living in China versus living in America. This led to a 15% increase in China's GDP/PPP for the next 41 years. The system, started by Comrade Deng Xiaoping. So what does this mean? 15% increase for 41 straight years. Imagine this. Let's go back to the 10,000, right? Middle class Chinese peasant. You have 10,000 in your safe right now, in your vault at home. You decide to deposit this to the bank. And let's say, imagine, right? So 10,000 times 15%, right? 1.15 for 41 years to the exponent of 41. This means that let's say if you take out this $10,000 from a Chinese bank 41 years later, you deposited this money in 1978, you decided to retire in 2019 and withdraw this money, yeah, this is what happens. 10,000 times 1.15 to the exponent of 41, $3.08 million. Yes, you go from middle class to generational wealth. Banking can absolutely work. You might think it's controversial, but yeah, this has led to the greatest economic miracle perhaps the world has ever seen. But unfortunately, I'm 100% certain, I'm 100% positive that we'll never ever see something like this in our lifetime ever again. Comrade Deng Xiaoping was truly once in a generation genius, and very important to remember. Yeah, he was only 5 feet 2 inches tall, 157 centimeters. For the boomers in China, and when they were working, right, there was very, very few seniors in China. So, there was the tax burden on them was 10 times less versus the current Chinese generation that's in the workforce right now. So, yeah, right now, the average income in China, roughly, I would say it's about 5,000 yuan, Chinese yuan per month. So you're looking at about $700 USD. Yeah, no more, no less, right? That's my most honest estimate. So yeah, a lot of young people, that's why they're choosing to opt out of the pension system, right? So that's before deductions, 5,000 yuan per month. If you choose to enter the Chinese pension system, right, the deduction is 1,500 yuan per month. 30% of your paycheck gone every single month. Your take home after the pension is only going to be 3,500. That's what I'm talking about, the aging population. It will destroy every single society because there's going to be so much tax burden on the youth. And so, yeah, the old people will eventually destroy all of the young people. They will destroy all of their hopes and aspirations because, yeah, the young people, they have to keep giving away 30% of their paycheck to these Chinese boomers to pay their pension. That's how the system works, right? And you have to remember, back in 1978, China had 0 university graduates. Now in 2025, China has over 3,000 universities. And yes, there are currently 40 million Chinese students enrolled in these universities, right? Most university programs are 4 years long. So there's about 10 million Chinese students, right? 22, 23-year-olds that's currently graduating from these 3,000 plus universities in China. No economy in the world can create over 10 million white-collar jobs for their youths. That's just physically and mathematically impossible. So yeah, it's easy to create jobs, right? When there are virtually 0 skilled workers in China, when the literacy rate is only 20%, when nobody's going to university. But now these universities, they have been overloaded with 40 million Chinese students, right? Nothing in this world can last forever. And there's a great saying in China. It's called 天时地利人和. This can roughly be translated to English as to basically, yeah, right place, right people, right time. The Chinese boomers, same with the Western boomers, they were simply born in a better time period. And once again, I'm talking about on average, their life was easier than the current generation. The vast majority of the Chinese and the Western youths, right, these millennials, the Gen Z, and eventually Gen Alpha, they're going to be 100% cooked. So yeah, in conclusion, this is why I always talk about, right now I have a full-time job, honestly, right? I'm honestly working between 65 to 70 hours a week. Yes, it is extremely difficult, but I mean, there's really no other way. There's the only way I can pay back my debt, right? My debt is currently decreasing by over $1,000 a month, and I'm truly grateful. And so on top of my full-time job, I also have the opportunity to build this channel. I mean, that is the only way to escape extreme poverty. Do you think someone like Mr. Beast, do you think he only works 40 hours a week? Hell no. And so yeah, if you guys want to ask me, what do you think is the best solution for young men to move forward? Because the vast majority of my audience are men. Well, like what I said at the start of this video, is if you do end up working in a blue-collar industry, if you're doing something that requires hard physical labor, it's going to wear your body down. And I said, yeah, almost every single Chinese person that's working the 996, that's doing physical labor, I would say by the age of 35, 37, 40, you're guaranteed to get a lumbar disc herniation. And once you get that searing pain in your back, there's no cure, absolutely zero. It's happened to so many of my family members. I've seen it happen to so many Chinese people. You can only manage with things like acupuncture and massage. So I would say this, for young men, it is extremely important for you to work extremely hard. But yeah, if you do end up in the industry, because let's face it, there's good money in the trade, right? But I would say, if you have a successful career, let's say working as an HVAC technician, right? Work extremely hard your younger days. It's not going to be such a huge deal when you're young, when you have energy, when you're 20, 22, 25, I would say even maybe 30. But once you get into your 30s, right now I'm certainly starting to feel it. I'm 33 years old now. I would say, just work as hard as possible from between your 18 to 30, possibly until when you're 35. And I would say roughly at the age of 35 to 37, you need to start possibly thinking about, I'm hoping by this time period, let's say if you've been working in the trade for a while now, you have generated some wealth. I'm certainly hoping that you don't have any student loans or line of credit and you got a little bit of savings. And yeah, thinking about starting your own business so you can hire other people to work for you so that you can be your own boss, right? Once again, right, I'm not saying that, you have to retire by 35. That's just impossible. I'm saying that you can transition to something white collar. You can transition to office work. Because if you're just sitting in front of a desk, right, if you're just typing out some emails, some invoices, if you're just doing some Zoom meetings, or if you're just, crunching some numbers on Excel spreadsheets, it's really not that big of a deal. You can easily work 60, 70, or 80 hours a week. But if you're doing physical labor, it's impossible. And once you get to, I would say, roughly 35 or beyond, it's going to just completely destroy your body. That's why, as part of, Comrade Deng Xiaoping's economic opening up policy, yes, he did propose the 996. But once again, right, so when this movement started, 1 million blue-collar jobs got to retire at 50, and the million blue-collar jobs got to retire at 55, because, the physical labor is going to completely destroy your body. And that is why, Blacks and Hispanics, once again, right, on average, they're significantly less educated versus the Asian and white Americans. So that's why the majority of Asian and white Americans, they go into white-collar jobs. That's why they get to live longer. And the majority of Black and Hispanic Americans, they go into blue-collar jobs. That's why they get to live significantly shorter. And once again, that is why women live significantly longer than men, because they don't want to do the hardcore physical labor. There's so much more to China's economic miracle transition to capitalism, how banking actually works, the 996 Comrade Deng Xiaoping. But once again, right, first two parts of the monologue was already 2 hours and 39 minutes. I don't want to make this part too long. I think this video is already getting too long. But this is going to be the finale of my 3-hour plus monologue. I will come back to the topic like China's economic miracle transition to capitalism, Comrade Deng Xiaoping, in future videos. I just if you guys are interested, I would say definitely search up Comrade Deng Xiaoping. It was truly a once in a lifetime genius. I would say he's probably smarter than Albert Einstein for sure. And I just want to thank everybody that has clicked on this video and watched it all the way until the end, especially if you have seen all 3 parts of my 3-hour plus monologue. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And if you guys have enjoyed the contents of this video and also for the entire monologue, please leave a like for this video, leave a comment down below, consider subscribing to this channel and turn on the notification button. Thank you guys so much and hope you guys will have a great weekend.